Good evening. Welcome back to Answers on Eschatology. My name is Dan Derry, and I'm the president of the Institute of Fulfilled Eschatology. Hey, we've been in a study of Matthew 16, 27, and 28, and I want to jump into Isaiah 62 with you this evening and take a look at the context and the framework for the coming of the Lord in this passage, which will help us to once again identify the time for the coming of the Son of Man. That is the second coming of Christ in Matthew 16, 27 and 28. Now, just to repeat some of what we have said before, Isaiah 62, which is obviously a parallel prophecy to Isaiah 40, stands behind, that is, it serves as a prophetic source for the coming of the Son of Man in Matthew 16, 27 and 28. Specifically, Isaiah 60, 2:11 says this, watch, "Behold, the Lord has proclaimed to the end of the earth, say to the daughter of Zion, Lo, your salvation comes. Behold, his reward is with him, and his recompense before him." Now that is a direct allusion, I should say it like this. Jesus directly alludes to that passage in Matthew 16, 27, when he talks about his coming, that is the coming of the Son of Man, to repay or to reward every man according to his deeds. And the larger context of both passages, Matthew 16 and Isaiah 62, are perfectly parallel, as we have seen already. They concern the coming of the Lord, or the coming of the Son of Man, to establish the kingdom and to repay or reward according to their works. And in Isaiah 62 and Matthew 16, as we've seen in the framework of those passages, that repaying or the rewarding is both in vindicative judgment against upon the wicked, and is the rewarding with salvation for the righteous. Now, that being established, the framework or the context for the coming of the Lord in Isaiah 62 is this. It is the time for the Messianic remarriage of Israel. That's important. And what that means is that the coming of the Lord is for the purpose of the remarriage of Israel. They are synchronous events. The Lord comes to marry Israel. The marriage of Israel takes place at the coming of the Lord. But what this means is that if we can establish elsewhere in the New Testament or in the Old Testament for that matter, when specifically the remarriage of Israel, the messianic eschatological marriage of Yahweh to his people was to take place, then we will have established definitively the time for the second coming of Christ in both Isaiah 62 and Matthew 16, 27 and 28 was to take place. All right? So before we get to making some connections here, I just simply want to establish the fact that the marriage, the messianic remarriage, is in fact a dominant theme in the context of the coming of the Lord in Isaiah 62. So let's just read this passage. There's only 12 verses, so let's just read Isaiah 62, and then in our next video, we will make some connections and determine and identify precisely when the marriage of Israel to Yahweh in fulfillment of Isaiah 62 was to take place. Isaiah 62:1 says this, "For Zion's sake I will not keep silent, and for Jerusalem's sake I will not keep quiet, until her righteousness goes forth like brightness, and her salvation like a torch that is burning. The nations will see your righteousness, and all kings your glory, and you will be called by a new name, which the mouth of the Lord will designate." Now, by the way, this imagery of the nations will see your righteousness, and all kings your glory, that is picked up by the Apostle John in Revelation 21, where he sees a bride adorned with the glory of God and clothed in the robes of righteousness. This is the imagery of the glorified bride of Christ. Let's pick it up in verse 3. "You will also be a crown of beauty in the hand of the Lord, a royal diadem in the hand of the Lord, your God. It will no longer be said to you, forsaken, nor to the land it will be any longer be desolate, but you will be called, my delight is in her, and your land married. For the Lord delights in you, and to him your land will be married. For as a young man marries a virgin, so your sons will marry you, and as a bridegroom rejoices over the bride, so will your God rejoice over you." You see this wedding motif that is so dominant in this theme, or in this passage. Verse 6, "On your walls, O Jerusalem, I have appointed watchmen all day and all night. They will never keep silent. You who remind the Lord, take no rest for yourselves, and give him no rest until he establishes and makes Jerusalem a praise in the earth. The Lord has sworn by his right hand and by his strong arm, I will never again give your grain as food to the enemies, nor will foreigners drink your new wine for which you have labored. But those who garner it will eat it and praise the Lord, and those who gather it will drink it in the courts of my sanctuary. Verse 10, go through the gates, clear the way for the people, build up the highway. Now that is parallel to Isaiah 40, and we see that that as the message of John the Baptist in the Gospels. Matthew chapter 3, Luke 3, Mark verse 1. Build up the highway, remove the stones, lift up a standard over the peoples. Behold, the Lord has proclaimed to the end of the earth. Say to the daughter of Zion, lo, your salvation comes. Behold, his reward is with him and his recompense before him. Verse 12, and they will call them the holy people, the redeemed of the Lord, and you will be called sought out, a city not forsaken. Once again, we have this imagery at the beginning and the close of this passage where we have the glorified bride, a bride who is the city, the glorified city. That again harkens back to, or it points forward to, I should say, to Revelation chapter 21 and 22, where we see the glorified bride of Christ clothed in his righteousness, clothed in the glory of God, who is the city of God, the New Jerusalem. And in this context, it is the coming of the Lord. The Lord comes to beautify his bride, to perfect his bride, to marry his people, to bring them into union with him, giving them his glory, his image, and his righteousness. That means that if we can establish, as I've said, outside of this passage, whether in the Old Testament or the New Testament, when exactly the wedding of Israel, the Messianic remarriage of Israel was to take place, then we will have definitively established when the coming of the Son of Man and the second coming of Christ took place also. And by the way, that is the coming of the Lord to save Israel. It is the coming of the Lord to perfect his people and to reveal them as the city of Jehovah, the glorified, new, and holy Jerusalem. And we'll see all of that and so much more as we pick this up next time and dive into deeper the manifestation of the bride of Christ at the second coming of the Lord. And we'll see that next time on Answers on Eschatology. Bye for now.